You think failure is your enemy. No, failure is your teacher, your executioner, and, if you learn correctly, your coronation. Too many men are broken by rejection, by defeat, by the cruelty of chance. But Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, philosopher of iron, teaches us that true mastery begins not in victory, but in collapse. Today, we will uncover how Stoicism transforms failure into fuel, and how you may wield this weapon to rise from the ruins of defeat to the empire of success. Failure, that word alone is enough to paralyze most men. They hear it and they tremble as though the gods themselves have cursed them. They imagine failure as the executioner's axe, cold, final, and humiliating. But let us not be deceived by the illusions of the weak. Failure is not the end, it is the beginning of all things that are worth building. It is the crucible, the fire that separates the common herd from the few who dare to rise above them. Yet, most men allow failure to enslave them. They wrap themselves in excuses, in pity, in resentment, as if these emotions were armor. But pity is no armor, it is chains. Resentment is no shield, it is poison. Consider this: the man who fails and curses the heavens shows that he has no understanding of life. He believes the universe owes him fairness, as if fortune is a nursemaid meant to cradle him. But the universe has no concern for his desires. It moves cold and indifferent, like the march of time itself. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, wrote in his Meditations that life is not about what happens to you, but how you respond. Failure, then, is not a verdict passed down by the gods. It is a mirror held up to your face. In that mirror, you will see either a coward shrinking back, or a ruler ready to claim dominion over himself. The tyranny of failure is born not from the event itself, but from the mind that interprets it. When a man falls and whispers, "I am ruined," he becomes ruined not by the fall, but by his belief. He crowns failure as his master, and once a master is crowned, the man becomes a slave. Failure dominates him because he bows before it. But there are others, rarer, sharper, who see failure not as a tyrant, but as a test. These men welcome the sting of defeat because they understand. Power is not given to those who have never bled. It is given to those who endure the bleeding and rise again. Imagine the life of Marcus Aurelius himself, an emperor draped in authority, surrounded by legions, courted by senators. Yet every morning he would rise and confront his own failures, his temper, his exhaustion. His doubts. He confessed to himself that he failed daily in his pursuit of virtue, that he often gave in to anger or indifference. But unlike the common man, he did not accept failure as his ruler. He stripped it of its crown, studied it, learned from it, and used it to strengthen his command over his own soul. The tyrant became the teacher. Failure enslaves the weak because they seek comfort, not strength. They collapse when the weight becomes too heavy and they cry out, "It is unfair." But fairness has no place in the real world. A Stoic understands that fortune does not play fair, nor should it. Fortune is not your ally, it is your enemy, and enemies sharpen you. To expect comfort in this life is to walk into battle without armor, blind and begging for mercy. Marcus Aurelius would tell you, life owes you nothing, not even success. The only thing you truly own is your response. Now, why is failure tyrannical? Because it reveals the truth that men wish to hide from. It strips away the illusions of grandeur, exposes the weakness in their character, and leaves them face to face with the question, who are you without victory? Most cannot answer, so they surrender. They become bitter, resentful, hollow. Their failure imprisons them not once, but for years, for decades, because they refuse to confront it. They sit in their cells of regret, clutching the chains that they forged with their own hands. But to those who understand Stoicism, failure is not a tyrant, but an invitation. It demands that you wrestle with yourself. It demands you rise from the ashes without complaint, without tears, without excuses. It demands you recognize what is within your control and discard the rest as meaningless. The failure of others, the betrayal of allies, the collapse of plans. None of these matter as much as the question, did you remain master of yourself? Because if you did, you are undefeated. If you kept command of your reason, your will, your discipline, then no failure can truly enslave you. Failure enslaves the man who wants the world to bend to him. It liberates the man who learns to bend himself to the world. Marcus Aurelius understood this truth, and in his meditations, he taught it to himself, as if engraving it into stone. To lose in business, to be betrayed in love, to be struck down in ambition, these are nothing compared to the loss of your integrity, your courage, your command of reason. That is the true tyranny of failure, not that it wounds your circumstances, but that it tempts you to surrender your soul. Discipline, the word itself cuts sharper than the sword. It is the dividing line between the emperor and the slave, the master and the victim. Men crave success, but few crave discipline, because discipline demands sacrifice. It demands that you silence your passions, restrain your impulses, and command yourself as if you were your own ruler. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, understood that without discipline, power is poison. He sat on the throne of Rome with legions at his command and wealth that could drown an empire, yet his greatest battle was not against Parthia, not against the barbarians on the frontier, but against himself. Every morning, Marcus wrote reminders to his soul. Not poetry, not boasts, not the grand declarations of an emperor, but confessions and instructions. Do not give in to anger. Do not be seduced by pleasure. Do not be shaken by pain. He scolded himself like a harsh general correcting a soldier. He disciplined his own mind as if it were an unruly beast. Why? Because he knew the truth that most men fear to confront. You cannot command an empire if you cannot first command yourself. Think of the temptations that circled around him like vultures. Power that could corrupt, flattery that could weaken, wealth that could soften. Yet Marcus treated all of it as smoke and dust. He trained himself daily to resist the sweet poison of luxury, to endure the bitter taste of hardship, to keep his mind unclouded by praise or insult. Where most emperors drowned in their excess, Marcus built a fortress of discipline around his soul, and this is why he endured. This is why his words still echo through centuries, while the names of other rulers rot in the dirt. But discipline is not born in comfort, it is forged in the fire of hardship. Marcus Aurelius faced plague that decimated his people, wars that bled his empire, betrayal within his court, and the endless exhaustion of ruling the largest dominion on earth. He could have escaped into indulgence, he could have hidden behind his power, but instead he chose the path of the Stoic. He disciplined himself to accept what he could not change and to act where action was demanded. He understood that complaining was weakness, that self-pity was a luxury no ruler could afford. And so he bore the weight of the world with silence, with restraint, with control. Discipline for Marcus was not a performance. It was survival to him. Life was a battlefield of the soul. Desires attacked from within, misfortune attacked from without. Discipline was his armor, his shield, his weapon. Without it, even an emperor would fall, not to enemies on the battlefield, but to the decay of his own mind. With it, he stood unshaken, unbroken, even when the empire trembled around him. Now, understand this. The discipline of Marcus Aurelius was not cold denial of pleasure for its own sake. It was strategic. It was the art of ruling oneself as a Machiavellian prince rules his court, with severity where weakness threatened, with mercy where balance was needed, with clarity when confusion arose. He disciplined his speech to remain measured, his actions to remain just, his desires to remain within reason. He did not allow himself to be enslaved by anger, for anger clouds judgment. He did not allow himself to be ruled by lust, for lust weakens resolve. He did not allow himself to cling to praise, for praise corrupts the spirit. His discipline was the throne on which he truly sat, higher even than the throne of Rome, but do not mistake his discipline for ease. Every day he struggled. His meditations were not written as a man at peace, but as a man at war with himself. That is the essence of true discipline, not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to surrender. Marcus Aurelius knew he would fail, and he admitted his failures to himself. Yet he returned again and again to the practice, the training, the relentless correction of his own weaknesses. He did not excuse himself because of his burdens. He did not soften himself because of his power. He did not grant himself freedom from restraint simply because he ruled others. He ruled himself with greater severity than he ruled the empire because he understood, if he lost command of his mind, Rome itself would be lost. This is what most men refuse to see. They look at success as a gift of fortune, as the product of luck or circumstance. They envy the emperor for his crown, but they do not envy the chains he placed on himself. Marcus Aurelius chained his own desires, shackled his own impulses, and bound himself to the discipline of reason. And in this binding, he became free, because the man who cannot govern his impulses is not free, no matter his wealth, no matter his title. He is a slave dressed in gold. Marcus' discipline was not glamorous. It was quiet, unrelenting, invisible. It was found in the restraint of a word he could have spoken, in the calm response to insult, in the deliberate choice to focus on duty rather than comfort. These small acts, repeated daily, became the empire of his character. The world remembers him not for his armies or his conquests, but for his meditations, the record of a man who disciplined himself so completely that even death could not silence his voice. Control. It is the sharpest weapon a man can wield, sharper than steel, more decisive than armies. And yet, most men scatter their strength on what they cannot control, and in doing so, they disarm themselves before the battle has even begun. They rage against fortune, they curse the weather, they despair over betrayal, they gnash their teeth at death itself. They spend their energy like gamblers throwing coins into the sea. But Marcus Aurelius, emperor and Stoic, understood the Machiavellian truth. Power does not come from grasping at shadows, but from mastering what is within reach. He distinguished between the world outside his command and the kingdom within it, and he ruled the latter with the discipline of a conqueror. Ask yourself, what can a man truly control? Not the turning of the seasons, not the betrayal of friends, not the rise or fall of empires. All of these lie beyond the reach of his will, yet the common man spends his life chained to them, tugged in every direction, like a dog dragged by forces he cannot resist. Marcus knew this was madness. He wrote again and again, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In these words lies the heart of the Stoic weapon. The man who understands what he can control and what he cannot becomes invincible because he wastes no strength on battles that cannot be won. Control, for Marcus, began with thought. Thoughts are the architects of action. Poisoned thoughts lead to poisoned lives. Disciplined thoughts lead to disciplined deeds. When insulted, most men erupt like fools, lashing out, shouting, plotting revenge. Marcus trained himself to respond with silence, with calm, with mastery. He understood that the insult was nothing. It was only sound in the air. The only danger was how his own mind would interpret it. If he controlled that, then no insult could wound him. This was not weakness. This was supreme strength, the power to remain unmoved while others burned in their own anger. But control does not mean apathy. It means strategy. A general does not waste his soldiers in unwinnable wars. A ruler does not squander his treasury on illusions. Likewise, Marcus Aurelius did not squander his inner strength on what lay outside his command. When plague swept through his empire, when the frontiers burned with war, when betrayal and conspiracy brewed in his court, he did not waste energy lamenting. Lament changes nothing. Instead, he asked, "What is mine to command?" He could not stop death, but he could control his response to it. He could not halt the greed of others, but he could govern his own justice. He could not stop the collapse of fortune, but he could strengthen his endurance. And so he did. This is the weapon of control, to narrow your focus to what is yours and to wield it with precision. Fortune may strip a man of wealth, position, reputation, even life itself. But fortune cannot strip him of his judgment, his choices, his will. Unless, of course, he surrenders them willingly. Most men do. They hand over their peace of mind to circumstance, as if peace were a gift of the world rather than the fruit of discipline. They cry when fortune frowns and laugh only when fortune smiles. They are puppets dangling on the strings of events. Marcus refused such slavery. He cut the strings. He stood as his own master, and let us be clear, control is not freedom from pain, but mastery of it. Pain will strike, misfortune will arrive, enemies will conspire, but the man who has trained himself in stoic control does not collapse. He endures. He chooses his response. He turns agony into strength, betrayal into wisdom, disaster into training. This is not mere endurance, it is transformation. By controlling himself, Marcus transformed every wound into a weapon. Where others saw only tragedy, he found material for greatness. Think of the Machiavellian prince, who knows he cannot control the winds, but he can control his sails. He cannot command the storm to cease, but he can maneuver through it, bending it to his advantage. Marcus Aurelius lived by this same principle. He did not waste himself wishing the storm away. He disciplined himself to navigate through it. He knew that control is not about bending the world. It is about bending oneself. The man who bends himself cannot be broken. Control is also restraint, the ability to hold back when impulse demands release, the ability to remain still when panic screams for action, the ability to measure words when rage begs to speak. This restraint is not weakness. It is power in its purest form. For what is more powerful than the man who commands himself when others are commanded by emotion? The general who does not lose his mind in the heat of battle wins the war. The ruler who does not yield to flattery secures his throne. The individual who does not surrender to despair walks out of ruins with his soul intact. Marcus Aurelius wielded control as a weapon not only for himself, but for Rome. His empire did not need another tyrant ruled by passion. It needed a ruler governed by reason. His discipline over his mind became discipline over his decisions, and those decisions shaped the fate of millions. Such is the ripple of control. Master yourself, and you indirectly master the world around you. Lose yourself, and no empire will be enough to save you. Dominion is not inherited. Dominion is not gifted. Dominion is seized, piece by piece, clawed out of the fire by those who refuse to stay buried in their ashes. Failure burns men to the ground, strips them of their illusions, leaves them naked and shivering before the truth of their own weakness. Most stay there, mourning the loss of their pride, but there are a few, very few, who take the ashes in their hands and begin to build. From ruin, they carve empires. From despair, they fashion strength. From humiliation, they rise higher than they ever stood before. This is the alchemy of Stoicism, and Marcus Aurelius was its master. Consider the spectacle of Rome under his reign. Plague swept through the streets, corpses piled high, the people trembled in fear. War pressed at the borders, draining the empire of its youth and treasure. Betrayals plotted in the shadows, whispers of discontent echoed through the Senate halls. An ordinary ruler would have collapsed under the weight of such calamities. An ordinary man would have begged fortune for mercy or cursed the gods for cruelty. But Marcus Aurelius was not ordinary. He understood that dominion is born not in times of ease, but in times of ruin. He took the ashes of his empire and turned them into lessons, into discipline, into strategy. He bore what could not be changed, and he acted with clarity where action was possible. The plague did not vanish, but Rome endured. The wars did not cease, but Rome held its ground. His strength was not in the illusion of control over fate, but in the dominion he held over himself in the midst of disaster. From ashes to dominion is not a tale of miracles. It is not the story of fortune suddenly favoring the broken man. It is the story of a man who refuses to surrender. Marcus Aurelius teaches us that ruin is not permanent. Only surrender is permanent. Ashes are not the end. They are the soil from which greatness may grow. The Stoic looks at destruction and asks one question: what remains within my power? In that moment, he discovers the seed of dominion. He cannot rebuild the empire in a day, but he can govern his mind today. He cannot command the end of plague, but he can command his response to it. He cannot silence his enemies, but he can silence his fear. Piece by piece, he rises. Brick by brick, he rebuilds. And soon, what looked like ruin becomes the foundation of his strength. This is the Stoic path, to embrace the ashes not with despair, but with resolve. Where the weak man sees tragedy, the Stoic sees material. Pain becomes material for endurance. Betrayal becomes material for wisdom. Loss becomes material for detachment. Every wound is fuel. Every setback is a teacher. And when this lesson is repeated day after day, the man who once lay in ruins becomes unshakable. He commands himself so absolutely that fortune itself cannot topple him. This is dominion, not the fragile crown of gold placed on the head by circumstance, but the iron crown forged in the furnace of suffering. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote of death, of decay, of all the things that men fear. He reminded himself daily that he too would soon be nothing but bones and dust. Why? Because to remember one's mortality is to remember the futility of despair. If all men are destined for ashes, then ashes are not defeat. They are simply part of the path. The only question is, will you rise from them, or will you lie among them? Marcus rose. He transformed his awareness of mortality into urgency, into discipline, into purpose. And so his reign, though filled with calamities, became one of resilience and wisdom, remembered long after the power of his armies had faded. Dominion, in the Stoic sense, is not conquest of others, though that may follow. Dominion is conquest of the self. It is mastery over fear, over desire, over grief, over rage. A man who rises from ashes with this mastery becomes untouchable. Empires may collapse around him. Fortunes may vanish. Friends may betray. But he stands firm because his throne is not built on sand. His throne is built on discipline, reason, and inner strength. Marcus Aurelius ruled the mightiest empire of his time, but his true dominion was over his own soul. That is why his words survive when his palaces have crumbled. That is why his lessons are studied when his legions are dust. From ashes to dominion means to embrace the fire and to see ruin not as a curse, but as the raw material of power. The Machiavellian truth is this: fortune is cruel, and it will strip you bare. But cruelty is also opportunity. It is in cruelty that you find the chance to harden, to sharpen, to rise above the herd who cry at their misfortune. The Stoic does not cry, he acts, he endures, he transforms. And in this transformation, he claims dominion that no external power can overthrow. And so we return to the heart of it all. Failure is no tyrant unless you kneel before it. Discipline is no burden unless you lack the courage to bear it. Control is no prison, but the sharpest weapon in the arsenal of a man who dares to govern himself. From ashes, there is always the possibility of dominion, but only for those who refuse surrender. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and student of Stoicism, lived in the storms of plague, betrayal, and endless war. Yet his greatest conquest was not Rome, it was himself. He showed us that success is not the gift of fortune, but the result of mastering the mind, disciplining the spirit, and transforming defeat into strength. The lesson is ruthless, yet liberating. Life will break you, fortune will betray you, death will come for you. But if you rise from failure with discipline, if you wield control with precision, if you claim dominion over your soul, then nothing, not empire, not ruin, not time itself, can truly defeat you.